The Washington State Penitentiary here in Walla Walla is the state's oldest and largest prison. It was founded 3 years before Washington even became a state. Now, 140 years after its beginnings, it's facing a change.
Good morning, everyone. We're here for a special closure of the execution chamber at the penitentiary here.
The room where 78 inmates have been executed since 1904 is stuck in 2010. The clock points to 12:56 perpetually, the time the last inmate was killed by lethal injection. It will stay this way for the foreseeable future as the death penalty comes to a ceremonial end with an addition of this plaque. It bears a quote from Governor Jay Inslee, whose legacy now includes abolishing the death penalty in Washington state.
When I made this decision fairly early in my term as governor, it was not an easy decision. It weighed very heavily on me for many, many reasons. And I dedicated myself and my team to really understanding the ramifications of the death penalty in our state.
So how did we get to this point, from having an execution chamber that is open to the public to an active gallows? Ultimately, shutting it down was a journey that took years. Over the decades, inmates sentenced to death got to choose, die by hanging or lethal injection in front of a gallery. But with the death penalty officially outlawed in Washington state, the death chamber, along with the gallows, is now offline.
I just think it's incredible.
Heather Evans is one of the authors of the report that convinced the Supreme Court in 2018 Washington state's capital punishment policy was racist. Evans is a University of Washington sociology professor, but back in 2016, she was co-author Catherine Beckett's graduate student.
Just thinking of how much time we all spent in Catherine's office.
Evans and Beckett combed through more than 2,000 capital case trial reports and came to this conclusion.
Race alone made a defendant who was Black 4.5 times as likely to get the death penalty than a defendant who was not Black.
The Supreme Court's opinion highlights specific examples of how race was weaponized inside Washington state courtrooms. It showed in some cases prosecutors worked to take the only Black juror off the panel, and how a prosecutor used, quote, inflammatory, racially charged images to highlight a defendant's race, even when that had no relevance to the case. Evans says even with reading through those cases, she did not expect the final calculations to show such a stark disparity.
Very shocking. I mean, it was stunning. When I first got that result, I felt sick to my stomach.
Even after triple, quadruple checks, the numbers were clear. 2
defendants shared all of the same legal characteristics, and only their race was changed, that just by being Black, we were 4.5 times more likely to get the death penalty.
The report highlights what civil rights attorney James Bible says he had known all along.
In this society, we rely on data, and data and research often make a lot of sense in terms of whether or not to move in a particular direction. There's also this gray area where some folks know that on occasion they don't have to be told that they're hitting in the face because they feel the blow.
Bible says, as an attorney, he has seen racism firsthand in the courtroom.
Impact that it has on people of color, specifically Black and Latino people in the state of Washington and around the country that have been disproportionately impacted by death penalty decisions. I think that what it means is some children will still have their fathers and their mothers, and moms and dads will still have their children.
As for Evans, the data scientist, she still finds the Supreme Court's unanimous decision surreal. Luckily, she has a daily reminder.
On my body, 9-0, to remind myself, again, I was so studying that we got the result that we did, but that it was unanimous and that it was our evidence that was used to reach that goal.
When the ultimate decision is death, there is too much at stake to accept an imperfect system.
The closing of the death chamber today,
Thank you for joining us,
is ceremonial. But this plaque is evidence systemic change is possible.
But that is, I think, the natural instinct, is people want to identify the quote-unquote bad apples, the few bad apples. Whereas the argument that we're making is this is a systemic problem. This is not 1 or 2 individuals who can simply be replaced. And when it's a systemic problem, rather than replacing people, you need to change the system.
As for the future of the death chamber, they're going to leave it the way it is for historical preservation. In Walla Walla, Sharon Yu, King 5 News.